Welcome back to the All Things Mizzou podcast. My name is Killian Wright, joined as always by Zach Knox-Doyle. Today, we're going to predict some of our stat leaders for Mizzou football for the upcoming season. But before that, we are going to hit you guys with some newsy items and recap this last week of fall camp that I've been at. At the time of recording, it's Wednesday afternoon. So this was actually the last practice that was available for media viewing. If you guys want to see my full observations of every day of every practice, you can go to our site at Mizzou on SI, and I posted a notebook for almost every day of practice. There was one day where I felt like there wasn't really enough going on. It was a big country music day, and that was about the only notable thing that happened. All these other days, I have full notebooks out, so you can just scroll back through those if you have interest in those. But we'll recap that anyways. First, we are going to discuss Mizzou's spot in the AP poll ranking. I know it's been a big talking point, whether it's those idiots at Barstool or it's randoms on Twitter, like complaining that Mizzou is always ranked at the preseason number 25. I understand the vibe of it, I guess. It's not an incorrect vibe, but it's a very incorrect statement because Mizzou has never been ranked number 25 in the preseason. That has never happened. This is the first time ever. So it's just a lot of very incorrect statements. And I know Maggie on the other podcast here was going to war on Twitter with some people about that. So I will join the cause on that. It is not true. So Mizzou is ranked at the number 25 spot. They are one of 9 SEC teams. Same as the coaches poll. It's the same group of 9 or same group of 8 above them for those SEC opponents. But Zach, overall thoughts on Mizzou and at the number 25 spot in the AP poll, and then what the rest of the poll means and looks like for Mizzou.
Well, I mean, you had brought up what I was going to say right off the bat, in that they have never been 25 at the start of the season. I find it very funny that people are taking such issue with this. And I honestly feel like it is a pretty fair assessment. Now, I didn't actually expect Mizzou to be in the top 25. I just thought that maybe they didn't necessarily have quite the media attention. But at the end of the day, they're still an SEC team that had, in my opinion, looked stronger at the start of the season than they did last year. Obviously, they agree with that because Mizzou was not ranked at the start of last year as well. And I think because of this strong running game that is expected to continue and maybe even get better, defensively, you don't have a lot of returning starters, but you have a lot of returners that have put in a lot of work and are looking to have really good seasons this year. And then on top of that, I think the most important thing is that the passing game looks a lot better at the start of the season than it did last year. There was a lot of uncertainties last year, and obviously those uncertainties came with good reason. So I think that all of that points to reasons that Mizzou should be in the top 25, and obviously they shouldn't be near the top of the 25. So where are you going to put them? At the bottom. That's totally fine. And also, I don't understand why people are taking issue. If a team is ranked 25th, they shouldn't be that much of a concern if you're one of the higher echelon teams. So it's a weird thing that I feel like is just something to make an argument just to make an argument. But at the end of the day, it's a good sign for Missouri that they're getting the attention because of all the work that they put in the off season. And I feel like it's a pretty fair assessment for where this team's at right now.
I personally think that the number 25 spot makes a lot of sense. If you look at the past year or so, Mizzou has last year, Mizzou wasn't able to get one of those ranked SEC wins against a fellow ranked opponent. And then if you want to go back to the last ranked win, it was 2024 against Boston College. And so it's been a little bit, but also Missouri doesn't lose to teams that aren't ranked. They win all those games that they're supposed to. And so if you put them at that number 25 spot, yeah, I would take Missouri to beat pretty much every team who's not ranked. Then it's a dogfight with all the teams above them. So I think it makes sense. I also think Missouri is capable of getting ranked wins. Absolutely, especially with a more explosive offense this year. I think they can get some higher scoring games. I think you could see them. I think they've got a decent chance to pull off some of these ranked upsets in the upcoming season, whether it be Ole Miss or Oklahoma at the end or anything like that. I think there's chances. So I do think that the number 25 spot makes sense for the starting point. You can give or take a few spots if you want. I don't think there should be any outrage from those who are saying Mizzou shouldn't be on the list. I think that's I don't think there's any reason to have a strong belief that Mizzou shouldn't be ranked. But I also don't think that there's a very strong argument for Mizzou to be like really high up next to these other SEC teams, or even in that you can make an argument maybe they're a couple spots higher, a little closer to Tennessee, but I don't know. I think it's okay where they're at personally. And they'll have chances. I mean, Mizzou has a relatively easy schedule to start the season. You've got Pine Bluff, Kansas, Troy State, and Florida. There's a very real chance that's a 5-0 start. And then at that point, maybe they're ranked number 13, 14, 15 heading into the sixth game. So I think it's fine to be where you're at. It gives a lot of room for improvement, which I'm sure they will in those first month-ish. But yeah, I think the number 25 spot is fine. Other AP poll news, not AP poll news, but AP news. Ahmad Hardy and Caden Green are preseason AP All-Americans. Those guys have been the two Tigers that have been consistently racking up these awards. And I do believe that they are the first pair to get voted preseason All-American honors in the Drinkwitz era at Mizzou. So that's interesting. You've got two guys who are consistently racking up these preseason All-American awards, these All-SEC awards. And they're both pretty consistently mocked in the first round of NFL drafts, which is interesting. So basically every outlet around the nation views Ahmad Hardy and Caden Green very highly, same as all the local media does. We all obviously understand the talent that Hardy and Green have. More ballot team stuff. Hardy and Green are on the coach's preseason All-SEC first team. And then Brett LeBlanc, long snapper, shout out special teams, is on the second team. And Robert Woodyard, the Auburn transfer linebacker, is voted on the third team. So Woodyard is the only transfer to get that nod. I know Woodyard, I believe, was a second team PFF All-American last season, if I recall correctly.
I think it was first team, actually.
First team? Okay, either way, on that PFF All-American ballot. And so he's obviously slotted as a returning SEC starter, but a first-time Mizzou Tiger. I was going to say first-time Tiger, but I guess he was an Auburn Tiger last year. So first-time Missouri Tiger, Robert Woodyard, is also kind of gaining some recognition. Enough with what other outlets think. Here's what we think. Cam Newton was at practice on Monday. Was that on your Mizzou bingo card for fall camp, Zach?
No, not at all. But I mean, it's pretty sick. I think that even though, like, regardless of who he was mentoring, well, obviously he's the mentor of Caden Lee. And I think that's pretty cool because obviously there is a connection with the quarterback and the wide receiver room there. And I think it's just, at the end of the day, it's a guy that has had a lot of college experience and was very successful in college on top of an impressive NFL career as well. So seeing a guy like that isn't associated with Missouri, wasn't associated with Missouri in the past, besides just being SEC schools, which during his time, I believe Missouri must have been in the SEC. But regardless, I think it's a pretty cool thing that was unexpected, gives Missouri some attention, and most importantly, is just a guy that knows his stuff, that's going to be maybe helping out behind the scenes a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know how much Cam Newton will be helping out behind the scenes at all, but
for Lee, maybe giving him.
Yeah, I'm not sure they'll stay in good communication.
Yes.
And I do think Mizzou joined the SEC the season after Cam graduated, but the overlap there is that Eli Drinkwitz and Curtis Looper were on staff for part of Cam Newton's Auburn tenure. So there's the overlap with the Drinkwitz and Looper stuff, and then obviously the overlap with Caden Lee, talking about how Cam Newton was one of the deciding factors in helping him come to Mizzou. Is obviously Austin Simmons and then Jacob Peeler and then Cam Newton. So very interesting there. Maybe we'll get Cam Newton hitting the big Mo drum before one of these games. Who knows? Maybe Cam Newton is at the Mizzou-Georgia game. That would make sense. So, yeah, that was very unexpected. But to be clear, Cam, as far as the parts that we saw that the media were allowed to observe at practice, Cam was not working directly with players. He was just kind of tossing balls around with a couple staff members, looked like maybe a friend or a family member he was with as well, was throwing a ball around with. And then Mizzou football also put out a social media video the next day where he was participating in certain parts of like drills and practice, but it looked like mostly just like workout stuff. Like him and Austin Simmons were working out together on the field. And I know like him and Zyshawn Edwards posed together for a picture, but as far as what we, the media, saw, Cam wasn't particularly active in drills. So just to clear that up. Other fall camp stuff that is a little more expected than Cam Newton showing up. Eli Drinkwitz referred to Tristan Wilson as a starter in the SEC, is his quote. Given that comment, and then what I have personally seen from Wilson in camp as far as the units he's rolling with and just how he looks overall, I would assume that means that Tristan Wilson is your week 1 guard or week 1 starting left guard when the time rolls around. Obviously, maybe by saying Wilson as an SEC starter, that just means like, hey, I think we have 6 quality starting linemen, something like that. But I do think it does mean that Wilson will be starting at left guard. Dominic Giudice, who's starting at center, has also kind of talked about like playing next to Wilson. So that also makes me think Wilson will be next to Giudice as the left guard. But Zach, overall thoughts on Tristan Wilson? I know actually a while ago you predicted that you thought Tristan Wilson was going to start. So I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, it was pretty close. Obviously, Wilson was getting a lot of reps, and same with Zach Owens. And I think that Wilson has definitely proved throughout. I mean, last year he was a really solid backup. You look at his numbers on PFF; they looked really good. He got about I want to say like 170-ish snaps last year, and he seems like he's had a lot of experience at left guard. I believe a little bit at center last season, and so he's done a little bit of everything. And he seems like he's the guy for the job. 5th year, lots of experience in the system, which is the most important. And seems like something Missouri's really prioritizing this year. Obviously, they went into the transfer portal and they picked up a lot of guys. But you see on the defensive end, we see a lot of returning guys looking like they're going to take a big step this year. And then now on the offensive side, obviously you have running backs. You got Alubade, but looking at Wilson in specific, seems like a really nice fit. And also, even if maybe Drink didn't mean it like that, you still have a guy like Zach Owens that is going to probably give you some really good reps this year as well, as a guy that had some starting experience, 10 games of starting experience in the SEC last year at Mississippi State, and just a lot of experience overall. So feeling pretty confident with the left guard position, as there's 3 of the 5 offensive linemen that could be starting or returning starters from last year. So I think that's really nice that the left guard, even though they don't have a returning starter, is looking pretty solid.
And one thing you touched on there was how it seems like they're leaning on returners a little bit. And that is a big thing that Mizzou does. And even though they also do it a lot with these 2-year transfer plans. So it's guys that at one point transferred, but are now returners, and it's, hey, let's lean on you a lot. That was Caden Green last year, who had transferred at this point, 3 off seasons ago, I believe, if I'm doing my math right. Guys, I'm terrible with math, but Caden Green transferred after his freshman year at Oklahoma, played left guard for Mizzou for a year, and then going into last season, switched to left tackle, and he was the big pillar that they were leaning on. This year, and then same with last year, you're looking at Zion Young, who is entering his 2nd year with Mizzou. Chris McClellan, who is entering his 2nd year with Mizzou. Now, ahead of this 2026 season, some of those guys that are entering their 2nd year with Mizzou, you're looking at Dominic Giudice, who's also doing the position switch thing, where he's going from left guard to center. And now it's, hey, Dom, can you help be one of our leaders on the offensive line? On the defense, you're looking at Darius, it's his 3rd year here, but he missed his entire 1st year with an injury. So really, it kind of in a way is his 2nd. And so you're looking at things like that, where it's returners, but it's also these guys who are at one point transfers. So a lot of these transfers, while we may be talking about returners as pillars, in a year's time, these transfers are going to be returners who then will be the pillars themselves. One thing I asked Eli Drinkwitz about was how he viewed transfers as leaders. And he answered it with, hey, I think the number one thing we want to establish is we want guys to be themselves. We want them to come in and be themselves, but that doesn't supersede being part of the collective identity that Mizzou football has. It's, you got to fit in, but be yourself. We think your personality is awesome. We want to integrate that. We don't want that to topple Mizzou, but we want to integrate it. Is essentially, that's what I got from what he was replying to me with. So I think that's interesting, and how they acclimate certain transfers and things like that. But yeah, I think a lot of the production you'll be kind of leaning on will be some of those returners, like you said, Zach. At right tackle, though, that will not be the case. Eli Drinkwitz said he feels pretty good that Luke Work and Caden Green are his starting tackles. Obviously, that's Caden Green at left and Luke Work at right. Luke Work is a Mississippi State transfer, and he's filling in for who was once the presumed starter, Josh Atkins, who was entering his 5th season, I believe, of college football. A transfer from Arizona State, injured his leg, suffered a setback in June, and is now expected to miss a lot of time. We don't know exactly, but the original return to timeline was September to October, and now we know that setback even further. So I'm guessing that means definitely not the September-October range, just by hearing that it's set back further. And so that has Luke Work as your starting tackle now. Obviously, something could still happen. Drinkwitz mentioned the third tackle, which would maybe be Jack Lang, could step up and overtake a job, or the competition is still open. So Logan Reichert, who was in the competition with Luke Work, could still jump in there. But right now, Drinkwitz said he feels pretty good that Luke Work is his right tackle.
Yeah. I feel like that's a pretty solid fit for the Tigers. Obviously, Work is not a returner, but he is a returning SEC player coming from Mississippi State. He only had one start last year, but he still had a lot of experience and a lot of snaps at really a plethora of positions on the line. So I think he's a guy that has had this experience against different kinds of players on the defensive side. So I feel like his IQ is probably really strong just because he spent a lot of time in a system against a lot of different archetypes of players. So I feel pretty strongly about this. Obviously, Missouri wants Atkins to be healthy, and that would be the best situation. But I think they're making the best out of a situation that isn't necessarily perfect. And it seems like Work is a really strong candidate to be the starting right tackle there. And yeah, I think he completes the line pretty well, and the line is still looking really strong, which is very important in a year where Missouri's running game is expected to be super strong once again.
Yeah, I think the earlier that Mizzou figured out their offensive line, the better off it would be. And Drinkwitz did obviously say that the competition is still, like, it's not shut. It could very much change. There's still a few weeks, I believe a day over 2 weeks, I believe, until the home opener or season opener against Arkansas Pine Bluff. So things could change. And then honestly, things could change in those first couple weeks as well. Lineups could very well change if something isn't working. So, but for now, yes, it does look like Luke Work. So that would mean, based on comments from Drinkwitz, the potential week 1 offensive line is looking like Caden Green at left tackle, Tristan Wilson at left guard, Dominic Giudice at center, Curtis Piegler at right guard, and then Luke Work at right tackle. So 1 transfer, 3 returning starters, and then 1 returner. Interesting collective right there. But Missouri's offensive line has been pretty consistently good with Brandon Jones, so there's all the reason to have faith in that. Last fall camp item, at practice on Wednesday, freshman 3-star receiver Jabari Brady was running a fade, made a pretty good grab, but came down awkwardly on his leg. He was down on the field for a few minutes, and then trainers helped him up and then off the field. So Jabari Brady, obviously he's a talented receiver coming into this freshman class. I think he's got great hands. He's good at adjusting. From what I saw, I mean, it was a hell of a grab, just to be totally honest. Nice catch from Brady. But he's got a lot of potential. But for now, yes, he did go down with an injury in practice. We will wait for further comments from Eli Drinkwitz on what Brady's status is. Moving on from fall camp stuff, onto the basketball recruiting front. Last episode, we talked about Scotty Atkinson, who is the, right now, only player committed in Missouri's 2027 basketball class, kind of defaulting him to the prized possession of the class. But his also would be the prized possession even if there were other recruits in there, because he's that good. But there are there's a pair of 4-star 2027 recruits that have now scheduled visits to Mizzou. One is Cameron Barnes, a 4-star in-state forward. He went to Lee Summit West originally, public school. That is my high school. And so I used to see Cam Barnes play back in the day in his freshman year of high school. And then he transferred, or he spent his sophomore season also at Lee Summit West, then spent his junior year, so this past 25-26 year at Link Academy. And then now he's transferring to Monarch Prep, which is a new school competing, I believe, on the EYBL circuit in Kansas City, Kansas. So Barnes also took a visit to Mizzou last year, I believe, and now he'll be taking another one. He's going to visit on September 19th. So for that Troy game, joining him on that visit is Principia. So another in-state kid, Principia center, Tyron Frazier. He's a 4-star prospect from Principia, who's one of the better non-EYBL schools in the nation. And he'll be joining Barnes on that September 19th visit. I know he also has a visit scheduled to Virginia Tech on September 5th. As far as Barnes, I know Kansas State had interest in him. I also know at one point Oklahoma State had interest in him. But for now, these guys are visiting Mizzou. So that's what it's kind of looking like on the recruiting front. But we're going to go to break. After we're back from break, Zach and I are going to give our predictions on major stat category leaders for Mizzou's upcoming season. But we will be back shortly.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
With Yuka Boom Color Bar, what we're offering is luxury color services, but we're doing it on our client schedules. Didn't want to feel like be a traditional salon. We wanted it to really feel like something completely different, especially for the Kansas City area. What we were trying to do is trying to find a brick and mortar that we could put a salon in. And it got complicated. And so what we ended up doing was pivoting, and we went into like a business acquisition mode where we were going to find a hair salon and then we were going to turn it into what we wanted to do. And Emprise was 100% behind that.
Like, we didn't just have a contact, we had a team, and they cared. And
we never sat in limbo at all with Emprise. They pushed us through, they helped us, support us. And not only that, but they've been our biggest cheerleaders since the day one.
Everybody who wanted our money, it was very difficult. It was very challenging part of it. But the people who were giving us the money, Emprise Bank, that was the easiest part. So we will always be grateful to Emprise.
I'm Cricket.
I'm JC.
And together we're the owners of Yuka Boom Color Bar.
Come see us at Park Place.
Welcome back to the All Things Mizzou podcast. Zach and I are now going to give you guys our predictions for the Mizzou stat leaders in the 2026 season. We're going to start with ones that I think are pretty easy to predict, so we'll probably skim through those pretty quickly, but I'll toss it your way anyway, Zach. Your predictions for the stat leader in passing yards and passing touchdowns.
Austin Simmons. I mean, that's kind of the consensus. He was the first player to be named a starter for Mizzou this year back in spring. So I think he's a guy that Mizzou has a lot of confidence in. We've heard many players, many coaches compliment his IQ, his arm strength, all of that. So it really looks like coming into this season, he is poised to have a really solid season, and Missouri definitely trusts him. So I've got him leading both those categories.
Yeah, there's no reason not to. He's going to start for Missouri. So not too often the backup quarterback leads the team in passing yards. I guess that is actually what happened to Ole Miss last year.
That's true.
But I think Austin Simmons is obviously, he's going to have the reins for Missouri. Has looked good in fall camp. Every position coach I've talked to, every player I've talked to, and then the players that have gone out there and spoken at press conferences as well, everyone has told me that Austin Simmons is legit. He's smart. He's adaptable. He's got an arm. He can make any throw. He learns quickly. He's in the film room. Just all the things you want to hear is what you're hearing about Austin Simmons. So while he might not have had the best year last year, started off a little up and down and then dealt with some injuries throughout the rest of the year, signs are pointing toward that he's primed for a significantly better year in his debut season at Missouri. Moving on to the rushing yards and rushing touchdowns leader, Zach, I will kick it your way again. Who do you got?
Another obvious one here, I'm going with Ahmad Hardy. He was one of the best running backs in the nation last year. 1,649 yards, 16 touchdowns. When you look at Jamal Roberts, he also had a very solid year. I mean, an exceptional year for a backup, 753 yards, 6 touchdowns. But once again, it's just looking like Hardy's poised for another great year. He's recovering well right now. Everything looks to be on track. So I've got one of the best running backs in the country, proving that he might be the best running back in the country this season.
Yeah, I mean, even if Hardy does miss some time, and Robert starts out the season as lead tailback while you're either integrating Hardy back in or working on just getting him back to full health, which, by the way, we won't know anything about Hardy's health for at least a little longer. Eli Drinkwitz is going to give us an update, or he's not giving us an update, excuse me. He is meeting with team doctors on the 22nd, and then we will see the next time we get an update from Eli Drinkwitz. Obviously, we will have that out, content on socials and the website whenever that happens. But for now, Hardy's status is still a little bit unknown. But anyways, back to the category prediction. Yes, I also have Ahmad Hardy as my rushing yards and touchdown leader. Ahmad Hardy could play half the season and probably still lead in rushing yards and touchdowns. And that's not me at all in any way saying I think he's going to play half the season. I'm just saying he is that good. Single season rushing yards record, or single season program rushing yards record last year. If he's healthy, could break it again this year, to be totally honest. So there's no reason not to predict Ahmad Hardy. Zach, this is where, though, it starts to get a little more interesting. And we'll go one by one for each of these because I don't know about you. Mine are not the same for each of these next 3 following categories. But I will start with receptions leader. Who do you have leading the Tigers in receptions?
So I've got Caden Lee here. He's had 101 receptions over the last 2 seasons. Last year it was in the 40s. And I think last year we saw Kevin Coleman as the guy leading the team in receptions by far. He had 66 and Olubade was second with 30, I believe. And I don't think that level of disparity is going to happen again. But I do believe that Caden Lee is he's coming in as an all SEC wide receiver, much like Coleman, expected to get a lot of reps, has a connection with Simmons. So I've got him getting the most receptions this year.
This is a really tough choice for me, honestly, because I think last year it was so obviously the offense was catered kind of by force to utilize Kevin Coleman in such a heavy manner. Prabula had his limitations. He wasn't great throwing downfield. A lot of screen, a lot of flats, a lot of short routes within 10-ish yards. So that led to a lot of Kevin Coleman stuff because that's obviously his bread and butter. I think with Austin Simmons, you have a lot more versatility in what you want to do. I mean, one of the players told me he thinks Austin can make any throw. I think Austin does give you a lot more downfield options, whether it's with tight ends or boundary guys. At the same time, though, he's already got that chemistry with Caden Lee, who's going to be in the slot and funneled into those options that we know Mizzou receivers in the past have done really well in, whether it was Luther in the slot and then last year Kevin Coleman in the slot. Now you got Caden Lee in the slot. And so there's a pattern here, and it's very reasonable to assume Caden Lee will lead the team in receptions. I think it's going to be very close. I'm picking Caden Lee as well.
Okay.
I think Donovan Olubade will be right there. I don't think Kevin Coleman more than doubled Olubade's total last year. We got to remember, Olubade wasn't even starting for a lot of the season. It was still rolling with Marquise Johnson there for a while. And then Olubade had fully hit a stride, and he was still a true freshman trying to figure out matching up against these SEC corners for the first time. Kind of got overtasked in the bowl game, you could tell. Now he's got a full offseason under his belt. He's got a full season of experience. I think his role is going to be much more defined this year than it was last year. It just kind of felt like Mizzou was realizing as the season goes along, like, oh, wow, we can actually turn to Donovan for this. Or now we can turn to him for not just a jump ball. We can turn to him over the middle of the field. Like, I think there's a lot of things you can do with Donovan that will allow him to maybe be up there. And so I would not be surprised if Donovan leads the team in receptions. But with the familiarity of Simmons and Lee, and then the past couple years of Mizzou's slot production, I am going to go with Lee. But I think it'll be much closer than it was last year.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. I think Alubade's definitely going to be closer than less than half of the receptions of the leading receiver. And I mean, that is just because, well, we expect him to start this year. We also expect him to be more familiar with the schemes, all of that. And I mean, to just make it real simple, he's not a freshman anymore. He's not new to this anymore. So I think that'll be really fun to watch both of them. And for receiving yards, I did stick with Caden Lee, but again, I think it's going to be really close just because Lee has shown in every season his yards per catch has been at least 14.4 yards per catch. I think he is a guy that can be a bit of a deep threat as well. So I went with him, but again, I can see both these guys going for possibly both over 700 yards, 800 yards.
I mean, 2 years ago, Luther Burden had more receptions and Theo Weiss had more yards. Weiss on the boundary, Burden in the slot. I'm tempted to call that shot again for Alubade and Lee here. And I think I will. See, I'm on the fence here. I'm literally switching back and forth as we're picking. Because you also got to factor in the Caleb Goody deep threat, because I think that's going to, not to say Caleb Goody's going to lead the team in yards, but to say that Goody may be a better speedster deep threat than Alubade is. So maybe there's some way there. I'm going to go Caden Lee again, but it's neck and neck, man. It's going to be within like 100 yards. I will go Caden Lee, but it is very, very close in my opinion.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch, and obviously it's not going to be like a battle between these guys. They're on the same team, but it is going to be exciting to watch both of these guys just rack up some stats this year. Like we're predicting, I can really see both these guys having a really exceptional season, and I'm glad you brought up Caleb Goody as well. I think a lot of Mizzou fans are going to really like him because he's just so fast and he's fun to watch. So, and he will, I mean, the last 2 years he's had 80+ yard touchdowns. So Goody's a fun guy to watch as well. For receiving touchdowns, this one was tricky for me. Last year, it was actually Brett Norfleet by like a mile. He had 5 receiving touchdowns, and the closest Tiger had 2, I believe, because Missouri as a whole had 15 receiving touchdowns in the entire season. This year, I expect that number to be in the mid-20s, maybe getting close to 30. I expect about 2 passing touchdowns per game. Obviously, the rushing attack is still going to be really prevalent, but looks like the passing game is going to take a step forward. Because of that, I don't think it's going to be Norfleet again, and also because Simmons has more of an arm and than Prabula did, I do expect less of relying on these quick little 8-yard passes to Norfleet, these screen passes, stuff like that. So I went with Alubade for the receiving touchdowns. He had 2 last year in just 30 receptions. I think everything's going to take a huge step up. And when you look at Caden Lee, he's never been huge with receiving touchdowns. He hasn't had more than 3 receiving touchdowns in a season, even the year that he had 60+ receptions. So I think it was around 60 receptions. I think that is going to be Alubade's bread and butter, and he's going to be a guy that they're going to throw some 50-50 balls to in the end zone. He's going to make some elite grabs. So I've got him leading the receiving touchdown category there.
And I take your Brett Norfleet, hey, there's no more bow limitation. And I raise you that Mizzou is emphasizing the vertical tight end use. And so, yes, that means we're going to get more usage as a whole, I think. I think if Norfleet is healthy, I still think there's reason to believe he kind of established himself as a really quality target last year. I think there's reason to believe. I am going to go with the Alubade, though.
You're a curveball. I thought you were totally going with Norfleet.
I'm thinking about it, and there's a chance, but most of Norfleet's red zone usage was in that non-con slate. I think I'll go Alubade, because I do believe, I think Alubade it will be a really good red zone threat for Simmons this year, having a little more experience, maybe able to work some in tighter space a little bit more. I think Alubade as a bigger target will work out in the red zone. And so I think you're looking at really high productive seasons from Lee and Olubade, obviously. And then I think Norfleet's probably second there and receiving touchdowns, in my opinion, but it's relatively close.
Yeah. And Norfleet could still get 5 touchdowns like he did last year and maybe not necessarily lead the team. I think that we could see Olubade getting around, unironically, 6 or 7 touchdowns, and then Norfleet grabbing 5. If he grabs 6, he enters the top 10 for receiving touchdowns all time from Missouri wide receivers and tight ends. So that would be a really cool storyline to watch as well. But yeah, I think those are going to be the top 2 guys in the end zone for sure. And Lee will get a couple as well. Probably Goody will too, on just some deep grabs where he's going for 50 plus yards, something crazy like that. So I expect those 2 to be leading the category though, Olubade and Norfleet.
And if Norfleet can stay healthy too, because that's another thing. He didn't miss much time last year, but he was playing banged up for most of the second half of the year. So if Norfleet can stay fully healthy, then I think that raises his chances of potentially leading the team and receiving touchdowns. I will move on to the sacks leader. Zach, who do you got?
So sacks leader, I went with Darius Smith. He was a guy that, last year, the top 3 in sacks are now gone from last season. Number 4 was Darius Smith, who was leading it with 4 with snaps in like the 300s. This year, those snaps are going to double. I could see the sacks even doubling because last year he wasn't necessarily always that first guy that was expected to be getting all of these. So some of these sacks were going to different guys like Damon Wilson. This year now it's looking like he's going to be this first option. He could get into the double digits in sacks this year, and I would not be shocked. I think that he's definitely on pace to double his 4 and make it 8, if not even more this year. And looking at everyone else, I do think that it would come from an edge because, I mean, it typically does. And then also Rodriguez had 1.5 last year. Webb had 2. Those are the highest among returners besides Smith, who had 4. It really looks like he's going to lead that category this year.
Double digits is a lot.
I know it
Usually
is.
only 2 or 3 guys in the conference are getting that.
I think he can. I think he can because, I mean, last year, if you look at it, I think that a lot of those sacks got split between Young and Wilson, who combined for 15.5. 9.5 went to Wilson and 6 went to Young. And this year, I think Kitchen is a guy that I think will be very strong. And if he starts alongside him, he wasn't a guy that is racking up a lot of sacks. He had 0.5 sacks last year in 170 snaps. Obviously, that's expected to go up, but I don't think it's going to be like he's going to be a guy like Zion Young that's going to rack up all those TFLs and still get 6 sacks. I think he'll have a couple, and I think that just leaves more for Darius Smith to continue racking it up. My prediction is that he will get in the double digits.
Have at it. I think it's possible. I also think you got to keep in mind that Zion and Damon were certainly helping each other off the edge with the pressure. And then obviously you also had Chris McClellan up front. So it also depends on what type of pressure you're getting from the interior to help out there. Because Marquise Gracial, great run stuffer, has some room to improve in the pass rush game. And he said that he has been working on that a lot. He's emphasized that is like, hey, I've been working on my pass rush. So if that pass rush is McClellan-esque or a little bit closer, then yeah, double digits is a lot. That said, I have Darius Smith leading in sacks. Yes. Dark horse Dayton Hopkins, keep an eye on that. But I do think it's Darius putting on 25 pounds. Good God. And looking pretty muscular and lean still. That wasn't slop pounds, guys. That was real. So that's pretty scary for opposing tackles. To have Darius Smith coming at you now. And yeah, I think the edge room kind of orbits around him. I like Smith as the focal point of it. So yeah, I'm picking Smith to lead in sacks as well. We're the same and everything so far. I think same may be different on though. I will slide over and ask you now, who do you think will lead Mizzou in tackles?
I got Nick Rodriguez here. I don't know if did we do it again?
I thought you were going Woodyard. I also have Rodriguez.
Yeah, Woodyard's definitely someone to consider, and he was second on Auburn last year in tackles. I'm pretty sure on that. I can double check that, but I believe he was top 2 in tackles last year. But I think
Yes, he was second.
Okay. I was also thinking about possibly Banner because he was 3rd on the team last year with 59 and Rodriguez had 61. Very close. But last year, if you look at who was leading it, it was Trotter, a linebacker. I think the linebacker trend continues, and I see it happening with a returner in Rodriguez, who has looked very strong and poised, and now he's going to get even more snaps. So I think that's just going to lead to him leading the tackle room.
I think you can maybe keep Banner in mind in case he does end up moving down to the box more often, and does kind of take on that Carnell role. But it's also possible he doesn't take on that role and he stays a traditional deep safety, and instead, like Foston or Ludor Foston or Elijah Dotson goes into that role and is down in the box a little more. But I think probably, Rodriguez and Woodyard are probably your 2 best picks. And I'm gonna go with Rodriguez. I think he can really fly around the field. I think it's gonna help him a lot. And he was competing with Newson and Jacobs last season for some snaps. Then obviously Trotter was far and away there, but now those guys are out of the way. Rodriguez is like very clearly at least the number 2, if not the number 1 in the room. So I think there you go. It's Rodriguez. The path is pretty clear for him to take a pretty sizable jump in production from year to year. This last category is pretty random to pick, but I'll let you go first here. Who do you think is going to lead in interceptions?
I got Santana Banner here. He was 1 of 6 Tigers with an interception last season, and I just think he's a guy that's going to get a lot, like I said with Rodriguez. He's going to be a guy that gets a lot more reps this year. He's expected to be a leader of that safety room, and I think by leading that, he's going to go and snag the most interceptions. But this is like you said, definitely the category that has the most flexibility. I mean, there's times where it's just someone completely random that goes and snags a couple interceptions in some nothing burger minutes. So I think I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on. But I'm going to go with Banner here.
And I think the product of that is also weighing, hey, who's going to be on the field the most? And Banner probably will be. I think I'll go with the other safety. I'll go Trajan Greco. Greco's IQ, I think, could allow him. And I think not only Greco's IQ will allow him to make a lot of plays. I think since he hasn't played too much before, maybe some opposing offenses are unfamiliar with him and are a little more willing to throw his way, which I think would be a mistake. I think Greco will surprise people this year. I think he'd be interesting. I also do think Kenzie Ludor-Foston's a guy that a lot of the defenders have shouted out as making some takeaways in practice so far. And so that's probably a guy to keep an eye on. I do think him and Elijah Dotson will be splitting a lot of time at that star position. So then you kind of have to weigh in the quantity of, hey, how much are guys going to be on the field? And that's what's making me want to lean Greco. So I think I'm going to go Greco for the interceptions leader. But like you said, this is one that can go anywhere. Obviously, Laule's got the height and the reach at 6'4" at cornerback. Jaleel Florence is a guy that they keep nonstop talking about how fast he is. Santana Banner nonstop over the offseason talked about, hey, I'm working on improving my eyes a lot. I want quarterbacks to be able to read me. That kind of screams like, oh, I'm going to get a few picks this year. And then obviously Dotson is kind of a physical freak. And then Ludor-Foston has had these takeaways. And then Jaden McGregory is a guy that as a true freshman, they keep highlighting as shined. And guys are going to be willing to throw at true freshmen. Maybe that's a mistake. I mean, you saw Dante McClellan get a pick 6 last year, albeit against Central Arkansas, but it did happen. So you really never know. It can kind of happen from out of nowhere. But yeah, interesting discussion there with who's going to lead in interceptions. It's a little hard of a choice, but overall a playful exercise. I think overall a lot of these categories, the reason there's multiple options in it is because it's a deep team and there's options to turn to a lot of these positions. So it's hard to predict all those, but overall, any closing thoughts, Zach, before we go ahead and get out of here?
It was fun to I like little stat predictions. I was always a big stat guy, but yeah, it's interesting to think about, and I do like that you brought up that. I mean, the fact that we were able to have this discussion for over 20 minutes is because this is a relatively deep team that has a lot of different options. So it's definitely interesting to consider, and seeing. I think we could see some stats that really pop out this year. I mean, maybe Hardy goes and beats his record once again, and maybe Darius Smith gets double-digit sacks. I don't know. So it's definitely fun to think about, and yeah, looks like a lot of Tigers are set to have some really strong years this season.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will hear from Eli Drinkwitz on Saturday after Mizzou's close scrimmage, but that'll do it for the fall camp talk, guys. We are getting close to the season. Next week, it'll be a bit of a nothing week because there's no game going on, but the week after that, so the week of September 3rd, there is your home opener against Arkansas Pine Bluff. I know Zach and I are both excited to start ramping up our preview coverage and eventually that game coverage, but we are getting close, finally kind of exiting the offseason and now into what's about to be the real season. So make sure to stay tuned on our YouTube channel here at Mizzou KCSN, and then also on our website and our socials. But thank you guys for watching, and we will be back next week.